Iron Warriors and Primarch enjoyers, this is Sprues and Studs and welcome on into the channel. It's always a great time when a new Primarch gets announced, and even more exciting when said Primarch gets dropped, then shipped to our hands, and finally we can play with them. I mean, as adults we definitely do not play with them, we admire them through glass. So in this review video, we are going to be going over the articulation of Perturabo and finally going into details about what the Lord of Iron, the Breaker, the Hammer of Olympia is all about. Starting off with the unboxing. Before we move on to the review, I wanted to give a shout out to a very strong channel supporter by the name of David Toys. Just click on the link in the description below or you will be brought to the website and your eyes will be feasting upon the glorious Warhammer 40k as well as Horus Heresy action figures they have to offer. The reason why I use them is because they have excellent customer service, and usually if there's a problem with an action figure, they will go out of their way to make the wrong things right, which is more than I can say about those random sellers that are on AliExpress. Then before you check out, do not forget to use my affiliate code SNS to receive 12% off of your purchase. By using my code, you benefit yourself again because I use the commission that I earn to buy even more action figures that I normally would not buy, so your eyes can feast on more reviews. My initial thoughts of Perturabo is as follows. He's obviously a big boy and a chunky man in modified cataphracti armor, and this actually reflects in the heft of the figure. He feels dense and rather well put together. Then as I look at his action figure, there's a lot to take in because of the myriad decorations that are covering the whole entire figure. So let's dive right on in with the movement. The sensor array up top has around, I'm guessing, 45 degrees of rotation about this pivot point, and roughly probably a little bit under 90 degrees of movement up and down due to these wires that are attached to the back of it. The head, if you so choose, has 360 degrees of rotation, but it is a bit awkward because you have to dig your fingers into the crevice of this head recessed area. Interestingly enough, this ammunition belt of the Logos array doesn't actually inhibit the movement of this action figure in terms of 360 degrees of rotation, like I'm going to be demonstrating to you right now. You can actually achieve 360 degrees, which was actually very surprising to me. Also about the shoulder joint, you are able to get 90 degrees of lateral rotation off to the side. You are able to rotate the arms 360 degrees about this pivot point, even though the ammo belt wraps around it, as I am demonstrating to you right now. The biggest part that disappoints me is the lack of movement about the chest to waist region. If you look at these tiny wires right here, they are the culprit for this Primarch's lack of movement. From this point to about this point, I think it's probably around 45 degrees of rotation. As you can see, these wires are getting pulled taut due to this movement. Even though you probably aren't going to do this, but you actually have full 360 degrees of rotation that is possible about the waist to leg area, like I'm demonstrating to you right now. The knee has 90 degrees of motion, and it appears that the kneecaps have a little bit of motion too. You can then pivot the legs out about 45 degrees. Then this ankle region probably has about 45 degrees of motion too, and you can pivot this ankle area up and down like so. Then finally the foot can move minimally like this. Now if you're liking this action figure review, I highly suggest you hit that subscribe button, not only because the Chaos Gods will it, but well, it's free. Just FYI, this channel focuses on mainly Warhammer 40k as well as Horus Heresy action figure reviews, and I likely have arguably the largest catalog of said reviews. Now let's get on into the details. So Perturabo's custom armor is called the Logos and is quite the unique piece of art indeed. Starting off with the top of the Terminator armor, there are two very interesting sensor arrays that likely feed the Primarch a ton of information on the battlefield. Then I really like this decorative patterning above Perturabo's head, which gives this area a ton of flavor. Now the head area is dominated by wires that run from the front of the Primarch's face and forehead all the way to the back of the armor. Thankfully, as I demonstrated earlier, these wires are not actually attached to the armor itself. Then I really love how these wires give this metal boy his unique panache. The grimace that he is sporting befits his character perfectly, and I am glad that his eyes are also screened on correctly. Then the final thing that I wanted to point out is more of an aesthetic thing, in that I thought that this Primarch's flesh tone was supposed to be more pallid, pasty-faced, rather this lifelike pink. In fact, if you look at the promo pictures versus the real-life action figure, you can see there was a marked change. Now let's talk about the logos and the various regions of this very ornate armor. First of all, the pauldrons are massively terraced, which gives a ton of depth of flavor to this action figure. In fact, there seems to be 4 different regions, with each of them bearing their own designs. I especially love this hazard striping that is on the middle tier because it ties into the rest of the more bland looking members of his own chapter's armor. Perhaps the most striking thing about this area is this fringe right here. The fringe is obviously made of flexible plastic, but I think in the lore this would be made of metal, and they remind me of linkages on a gate for some odd reason. And underneath you get some more textured cloth, which contrasts very nicely against the gold of this area. The right shoulder is a mirror reflection of the left side, except that this Primarch is displaying a very nicely shaded Iron Warriors chapter symbol here. And the final thing that I wanted to say is that I find the colors that JoyToy chose for this region to be quite tasteful, with nice color contrast and balance as well. The chest area is dominated by this black protruding area that reminds me of a knight's lower visor. As I said earlier, the color contrast between the black, gold, as well as the gunmetal colors are absolutely fantastic. I also get this very archaic sort of steampunky vibe for this area due to the various hoses that are running from region to region. However, as I pointed out during the movement section of this video, while I like the various colors of these wires that give this region a ton of character, they sadly are the greatest weakness of such a good action figure. Then the waist area is dominated by this apparently very heavy golden belt buckle that has a metal gate that is hanging off of it. I do like the continuity of these metal fringes that are found in this tabard area that matches the pauldrons up here. There is evidence of some light shading in the linkages of this area, but I would have appreciated just a little bit more. Then underneath all of this action is even more texturization in this form of this plastic tabard that is heavily shaded and has a great deal of identity due to this texture. Wow, this leg area is absolutely magnificent. The area is so magnificent that it may border on overstimulation due to the contrasting designs and patterning, which is completely different from the very vanilla MK10 Space Marine leg armor. Anyway, the hazard striping on the top of the thighs is fantastic. Then you migrate down to this exquisite terracing with these different studs that are centered on the armor plates. One very small thing that I wish JoyToy would do is shade the bottom of the terrace, but that may be asking for a little bit too much. Then you have these half balls and this wild patterning here that is found on the side of the legs that also can be found on the top of Peter's head. Then this knee area gives further continuity as it ties into the chest area that I mentioned before. Then finally, the shin area has so much stuff going on with it, but don't get me wrong, I absolutely love how busy looking it is. As we move on to the back of the action figure, there are similarities too to the regular Cataphracti Terminators in that you have this power plant back here, but the fans and the generator and these hoses here are way more beefy and way more pronounced. Then the back of the legs has this tasty terracing. And now this brings us to the Logos array. Clearly this bullet spewing machine is belt fed from these 2 very large drum magazines that are located below this power plant area. Then it should come to no one's surprise that the belt itself is made of a very flexible plastic, which helps the movement in the arms. I do actually like the shading that JoyToy applied in between the areas here because it adds a little bit of depth. Then we migrate to the guns themselves. The first and perhaps the most striking thing is that there appears to be a gradient color that is occurring at the gun barrel, which may be a first for JoyToy. But anyway, I am really liking the dark gun barrel, which then progresses to a lighter gunmetal the further up you go. Then finally, I do like this unique color that JoyToy has given this area too. Poor Ferris. His esteemed Forgebreaker hammer is now desecrated in the hands of Perturabo. The hammer from tip to head is taller than a version 4 Space Marine, which is crazy to see. Then it would appear that JoyToy has washed this gunmetal area with a bronze type of shade, which is fantastic to see. And the alternating bands of brownish gunmetal and gold is a nice touch to add to. I also find that the back of the hammer with these sheets of metal to be a tasteful design cue that sets it apart from more plebeian hammers that are out there. Now, some of you may want to see some size comparisons, so let's get to it. I know these action figures are not period specific, but this version 3 Blood Angel's Intercessor barely comes up to his torso area. And then you have Titus over here that represents a version 4 figure that comes up to a little under his chest area armor. And here we have a Siege Tyrant Terminator next to his Primarch, and then a regular sized Librarian Council. And next we have a very massive Horus next to Perturabo. And finally we have Mr. Magic Man himself, Magnus the Red, next to Mr. Metal Boy. Wow, there was a lot to take in for this action figure of Perturabo. Despite the Iron Warrior's mantra of function over form, Perturabo's Logos is the complete opposite of that, in that he is the very definition of drip. You can't go a quarter of an inch on this action figure without the armor changing color and or patterns, which I think is a fantastic thing. You can clearly tell that the Imperium was definitely at the height of power, especially with the armor of Perturabo. However, unfortunately, there are a couple drawbacks that I do want to reiterate and mention, with the first one being the lack of movement between the chest and the torso region. I still find it hard to believe that the most crucial areas has limitation of motion to it. That being said, I think that this action figure is just a little bit unstable while you're posing it. I constantly found that the feet do not contact the ground 100%, which leads to instability, and it really doesn't help that this Primarch is actually quite top heavy. So you will need to move the feet around to achieve some sort of balance. I suppose in the end, these issues do not detract from the fact that this is a very fantastic action figure. And due to that fact, I believe that all Iron Warriors as well as Primarch collectors should get this very magnificent piece of plastic. Oh, another thing that I want to mention is that the joints out of the factory from JoyToy are very sturdy and stiff, which means that there won't be any kind of drooping as well as slouching of the action figure. Then due to all of these strengths that I have mentioned, I am pretty sure you are going to find this action figure at one of my year-end videos. With that being said, thank you so much for joining me in this action figure review. I am appreciative of all your views, likes, and subscribes, as well as those people who use my affiliate code. I would also like to hear what your thoughts are on this action figure, so just leave a comment in the comments section. And with that being said, I'll see you all in the next one.